The train whistle shrieked through the autumn air of 1875 as Sophia Sanders clutched her worn leather suitcase with trembling fingers. The journey from Philadelphia to Gila City, Arizona territory had been arduous, especially with her left leg, the one that had never healed right after the carriage accident when she was 12. But desperation had a way of making impossible journeys possible, and at 22, Sophia had run out of options in the east. Final stop, Gila City, the conductor called out, barely glancing at Sophia as she gathered her belongings. Her correspondence with Mr. Vernon Walker had been brief, but promising a widower with a small ranch outside town who needed a wife. She had been honest about her condition in her letters, though perhaps she downplayed the severity of her limp. Desperation, again, had guided her pen. The platform was bustling with activity as Sophia descended from the train, careful to lead with her good leg. Her modest blue traveling dress was wrinkled from the journey, and wisps of auburn hair had escaped her tight bun. She paused, scanning the crowd for a man matching Mr. Walker's description, tall with dark hair and a beard. He had promised to meet her train. "You must be the mail-order bride," came a nasal voice to her right. A woman in a garish yellow dress stood eyeing her critically. "You're the one coming for Vernon Walker," Sophia nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Yes, I'm Sophia Sanders." The woman's gaze traveled down to Sophia's leg, and her expression shifted to one of poorly concealed disdain. "Well, you certainly didn't mention that defect in your letters, I'd wager." She turned to her companion, another well-dressed woman. "Poor Vernon. First his wife dies, and now this." Heat rushed to Sophia's cheeks, but before she could respond, a deep voice interrupted. "Mrs. Prescott, I see you're welcoming our new arrival with your usual charm." A tall man stepped between Sophia and the gossiping women. He wore a weather-beaten hat and a dusty denim coat over his broad shoulders. His face was partially obscured by a dark beard, but his eyes, a startling shade of blue, were kind as they met hers. "Miss Sanders," he said with a nod. "I'm Victor Whitman. Vernon asked me to come fetch you." He glanced at the two women who were now pretending great interest in a nearby advertisement. "He was delayed at the ranch, cattle trouble." "Oh," Sophia said, trying to hide her disappointment and confusion. "Another delay, another complication." "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Whitman. You can call me Vic." He reached for her bag. "May I?" She relinquished her suitcase, grateful for the assistance but wary of the charity. She'd had enough pity to last a lifetime. As they began walking away from the platform, she was acutely aware of her uneven gait, especially after the long train journey had stiffened her muscles. She could feel the stares of the townspeople, hear the whispers. Poor Vernon. Didn't know she was crippled. What was he thinking? Victor slowed his pace to match hers, but made no comment about her limp. Instead, he pointed toward a wagon at the end of the street. "We've got about an hour's ride to the Walker Ranch. Are you hungry? We could stop at the cafe before heading out." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. She'd steeled herself for many things on this journey: loneliness, regret, even scorn, but not kindness. "No, thank you," she managed. "I'd rather just get to the ranch if that's all right." They continued in silence until they reached the wagon. Victor loaded her bag in the back and then turned to help her up. She hesitated, calculating the best way to climb aboard without making a spectacle of herself. "It's a high step," she acknowledged, embarrassment coloring her voice. Victor studied her for a moment, then the wagon, then back to her. Without warning, he placed his hands respectfully at her waist and lifted her effortlessly onto the seat. The action was so smooth, so matter-of-fact, that Sophia barely had time to register her surprise. "Sometimes high steps are just high steps," he said simply, climbing up beside her. He took the reins and clicked to the horses, and they pulled away from the curious gazes of Gila City. As they left town behind, Sophia found her voice. "Mr. Whitman, Victor, are you a friend of Mr. Walker's?" "Neighbor," he replied. "My ranch borders his to the north." He glanced at her. "Vernon's a good man. Lost his wife to fever 3 years back. Has a young son too, Daniel. He's 6. Sophia nodded, absorbing this information. Her letters with Vernon had been cordial but sparse on details. She knew he was 36, a rancher, and widowed with a child. It had seemed enough at the time. "The town seems close-knit," she ventured. Victor's mouth quirked beneath his beard. That's one way to put it. Small towns have long memories and longer tongues. He turned to look at her directly. Those women back there, they don't speak for everyone. It's all right, Sophia said, staring straight ahead. I'm accustomed to such reactions. You shouldn't have to be. The simple statement hung in the air between them. The terrain gradually changed as they left town, the landscape opening up into vast expanses of scrubby desert dotted with cacti and rugged mountains in the distance. The October air was dry and cool, nothing like the damp autumn chill of Philadelphia. It's beautiful, Sophia said, genuine wonder in her voice. Different but beautiful, Victor nodded. Takes some getting used to, but there's freedom out here, space to breathe. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic clop of hooves and creak of wagon wheels the only sounds. Sophia found herself relaxing slightly, the tension of the train station encounter beginning to fade. May I ask what happened? Victor said suddenly. To your leg, I mean. If you don't mind telling. The question caught her off guard not because it was unusual but because of the way he asked. There was no pity in his voice, just simple curiosity. A carriage accident when I was 12, she explained. My father was driving. The horses spooked during a thunderstorm and we overturned. My leg was crushed beneath the carriage. The doctors did their best, but, she shrugged, it never healed properly. Your father, he died in the accident. My mother passed 2 years ago from pneumonia. I've been living with my aunt in Philadelphia since then, but Sophia paused. She made it clear I was a burden. Victor's jaw tightened. Some people don't recognize true strength when they see it. Sophia turned to him, surprised by the sentiment. Takes grit to travel across the country alone to marry a stranger, he added. Especially with folks making things harder than they need to be. Before she could respond, the wagon crested a small rise, and a ranch came into view below. It was modest but well-kept, a main house built of timber and adobe, a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney. Walker Ranch, Victor announced. Home sweet home for Vernon and Daniel. He hesitated, then added, and hopefully for you too, Miss Sanders. As they approached, Sophia saw a man emerge from the barn, tall and lean, with dark hair as promised. Her heart quickened. Vernon Walker. Her future husband. Victor pulled the wagon to a stop in the yard. Vernon approached, wiping his hands on a rag. He was handsome in a weathered way, with deep lines around his eyes suggesting both laughter and hardship. Miss Sanders, he called, his voice carrying across the yard. Welcome to Arizona. Victor jumped down from the wagon and moved to help Sophia, but Vernon was already there. He looked up at her, taking in her appearance with an unreadable expression. Then his gaze dropped to her leg and something flickered in his eyes. Sophia's heart sank. She recognized that look, disappointment, poorly disguised. Mr. Walker, she greeted him, determined to maintain her dignity. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Vernon nodded, extending a hand to help her down. His grip was firm but impersonal as he assisted her. Once on solid ground, Sophia straightened her dress and stood as tall as her condition allowed. I appreciate Mr. Whitman bringing you out, Vernon said, his tone polite but distant. I had a situation with some cattle breaking through the north fence. It was no trouble, Victor replied, unloading Sophia's suitcase from the wagon. Miss Sanders is good company. A small boy peered around the corner of the house, watching with curious eyes. Daniel, Sophia presumed. She offered him a gentle smile, but he ducked back out of sight. Well, Vernon said, clearing his throat, you must be tired from your journey. Let's get you settled. He took her suitcase from Victor and gestured toward the house. Victor tipped his hat. I'll be on my way then. Miss Sanders, it was a pleasure. His blue eyes held hers for a moment. Welcome to Arizona territory. As Victor climbed back into his wagon, Sophia felt a strange reluctance to see him go. He'd been kind to her, genuinely kind, when others had not. Thank you for everything, Mr. Whitman, she said. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. You walk just fine to me, Miss Sanders. With that, he clicked to his horses and drove away, leaving Sophia staring after him in quiet astonishment. Vernon shifted uncomfortably beside her. Shall we? He said, indicating the house. Sophia turned and followed her future husband toward her new home, Victor's words echoing in her mind. The interior of the Walker Ranch house was simple but comfortable, a large main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and doors leading to what Sophia presumed were bedrooms. The furniture was sturdy and well used, and touches of a woman's hand were still visible in the faded curtains and braided rug before the hearth. "This is Daniel," Vernon said, gesturing to the boy who now stood in the corner watching her warily. He was small for 6, with his father's dark hair and solemn eyes. "Hello, Daniel," Sophia said warmly. "I'm very pleased to meet you." The boy didn't respond, just continued to stare at her leg. Vernon cleared his throat. "Daniel, mind your manners. Why does she walk funny?" The boy blurted out. "Daniel," Vernon's voice was sharp with embarrassment. "It's all right," Sophia interjected quickly. "It's a natural question." She knelt down as best she could to be at eye level with the child. "I hurt my leg when I was not much older than you. It didn't heal quite right, so I walk a little differently than most people." Daniel considered this. "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes," Sophia admitted, "but I'm used to it." The boy nodded, apparently satisfied with her explanation. "Pa said you might be my new ma." Sophia glanced up at Vernon, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "That's something your father and I need to discuss," she said carefully. Vernon showed her to a small bedroom off the main room. "You can rest here. I'll prepare some supper soon." Left alone, Sophia sat on the edge of the narrow bed and finally allowed herself a moment of doubt. Vernon's reaction to her arrival had been lukewarm at best. Despite her honesty in her letters about her condition, it was clear he hadn't fully understood, or perhaps hadn't wanted to understand, the extent of her disability. She unpacked her few belongings, placing her mother's silver hairbrush on the small dresser alongside a worn Bible and a daguerreotype of her parents. Then she splashed water on her face from the basin, provided, and changed into a fresh dress, a simple brown wool that had seen better days. When she emerged, Vernon was at the stove frying meat in a cast-iron skillet. Daniel sat at the table, swinging his legs and watching her with undisguised curiosity. "Can I help with anything?" she offered. Vernon shrugged. "Nearly done, just beans and salt pork tonight, nothing fancy." They ate in awkward silence, broken only by Daniel's occasional questions about Philadelphia and trains. After the meal, Vernon excused himself to check on the livestock, leaving Sophia to clean up with Daniel's reluctant assistance. "You know how to read?" Daniel asked as they washed the dishes. "I do," Sophia replied. "Would you like me to read to you sometime?" The boy considered this, then nodded. "Pa tries, but he falls asleep," Sophia smiled. "Well, I promise to try to stay awake." When Vernon returned, he settled in a chair by the fire with a ledger, making notes and barely acknowledging Sophia's presence. She took the opportunity to read to Daniel from a tattered book of children's stories she found on a shelf. The boy was an attentive listener, and by the time the story ended, he had edged close enough to lean against her chair. "Time for bed, Daniel," Vernon announced, closing his ledger. The boy went without protest after Sophia promised another story tomorrow. When he was tucked away in his small bedroom, Vernon finally turned his attention to her. "Miss Sanders," he began awkwardly, "I feel I must be honest with you." Sophia steeled herself. "Please do. Your letters mentioned a difficulty with walking I didn't realize." He gestured vaguely toward her leg. "That is, I expected something less noticeable." The words stung, but Sophia kept her expression neutral. "I believe I was quite clear about having a pronounced limp, Mr. Walker." "Yes, well," he shifted uncomfortably. "Running a ranch requires a great deal of physical labor, even for a wife." "I assure you I'm not afraid of hard work," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "My condition hasn't prevented me from maintaining a household before." Vernon nodded, but doubt lingered in his eyes. "Perhaps we should take some time before proceeding with any marriage to ensure it would be suitable for all concerned." The unspoken meaning was clear. He was having second thoughts. Sophia felt a curious mixture of hurt and relief. "That seems sensible," she agreed. "I wouldn't want to enter into a marriage where either party harbored reservations." "You're welcome to stay here while we consider," Vernon added hastily. "I've paid for your journey after all, and there's nowhere else for you to go immediately." "That's very Generous, Sophia managed, though the arrangement made her feel like an unwanted parcel that couldn't be returned. I'll earn my keep, of course. With that uncomfortable conversation concluded, they bid each other an awkward good night, and Sophia retreated to her small room. Alone in the darkness, she finally allowed silent tears to fall. Not for Vernon's rejection, she hardly knew the man, but for her own foolishness in believing that 3,000 miles might somehow erase the stigma that had followed her since childhood. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the smell of coffee. Sophia rose early, determined to prove her usefulness. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, where she found Vernon already up and cooking breakfast. "Good morning," she greeted him, keeping her tone light and professional. "May I help with anything?" Vernon glanced at her, seeming surprised by her composed demeanor. "Eggs are nearly done. Could set the table, I suppose." They settled into an uneasy routine over the next few days. Sophia took over much of the cooking and housekeeping, which Vernon seemed relieved to relinquish. She also spent time with Daniel, reading to him and helping him practice his letters. The boy warmed to her quickly, fascinated by her stories of Philadelphia and increasingly unconcerned about her limp. Vernon, however, remained distant. He was unfailingly polite but clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Sophia often caught him watching her as she moved around the house, his expression troubled. When she offered to help with outdoor chores, he politely declined, suggesting she wouldn't be able to manage the uneven ground around the ranch. On her fourth day at the Walker Ranch, Sophia was hanging laundry when she heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Shading her eyes against the October sun, she recognized Victor Whitman's tall figure at the reins. Her heart lifted inexplicably at the sight of him, and she smoothed her apron self-consciously as the wagon pulled into the yard. "Good morning, Miss Sanders," Victor called, tipping his hat. "Is Vernon around?" "He's checking the south pasture," she replied. "He should be back soon if you'd like to wait." Victor jumped down from the wagon. "I can spare a few minutes." He approached the clothesline, taking in the fluttering sheets and shirts. Settling in all right, something in his direct gaze made it difficult to dissemble. "It's an adjustment," she admitted. Victor nodded, studying her face. "Vernon treating you well. Mr. Walker has been perfectly civil," Sophia said carefully. "Civil," Victor repeated, the corner of his mouth lifting. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it." Sophia turned back to her laundry, pinning a shirt to the line. "Mr. Walker has reconsidered his matrimonial plans," she said, striving for a matter-of-fact tone. "Given my condition." Victor was silent for a long moment. When Sophia glanced at him, his expression had hardened. "Has he now?" he said, his voice deceptively mild. "It's a reasonable concern," Sophia felt compelled to add, though the words tasted bitter. "A ranch wife should be capable, and are you incapable, Miss Sanders?" The directness of the question startled her. Because from what I've seen, you manage just fine. Different maybe, but just fine." Before Sophia could respond, Vernon rode into the yard on his bay gelding. He dismounted stiffly, eyeing Victor with surprise. "Whitman," he greeted him. "Didn't expect to see you today." "Just returning that fencing tool I borrowed," Victor replied, his tone cooler than it had been with Sophia, "and checking how your new arrangement was working out." Vernon's eyes flicked to Sophia, then back to Victor. "Everything's fine. Good to hear." Victor turned to Sophia. "Miss Sanders, I'm heading into town tomorrow for supplies. If you need anything, I'd be happy to pick it up for you." "That's very kind," Sophia began. "No need," Vernon interrupted. "I'll be going into town myself soon enough." An awkward silence fell, broken only by the snapping of laundry in the breeze. "Well," Victor said finally, "I should be on my way." He tipped his hat to Sophia. "Miss Sanders, always a pleasure." As he climbed back into his wagon, he paused. "By the way, Vernon, the cattle drive to Tucson is coming up next month. You joining this year?" Vernon frowned. "Can't leave the ranch untended for 2 weeks." "Seems to me you've got capable help now," Victor observed, his gaze shifting meaningfully to Sophia. Vernon's jaw tightened. "We'll see." With a final nod to Sophia, Victor drove away. Vernon watched him go, a furrow between his brows. "Victor Whitman is an interfering man," he muttered, almost to himself. "He seems kind," Sophia ventured. Vernon snorted. "He's taken a shine to you, that's certain." The observation hung in the air, neither accusation nor endorsement. That night, after Daniel was asleep, Vernon approached Sophia as she mended a torn shirt by the fire. "I've been thinking," he began awkwardly, "about our situation." Sophia set her sewing aside, bracing herself. "The cattle drive to Tucson pays well. We could use the money, especially with winter coming." He cleared his throat. "But someone needs to mind the ranch, and Daniel—" "I see," Sophia said carefully. "If you're willing to stay on just until I return from the drive, I'd pay you fair wages." He rushed on before she could respond. "You'd have to manage everything yourself. Feed the chickens, milk the cow, keep an eye on things. Daniel would help, of course, but he's just a boy." The proposition was clear: not a wife, but a temporary housekeeper. It was a practical arrangement that would give her time to consider her next steps and some money to fund them. "I can manage," she said simply. Relief flooded Vernon's face. "Good, that's good," he hesitated. "About the other matter, marriage, perhaps we could revisit that conversation when I return, if things go well." It was a tepid offer, but Sophia nodded. What choice did she have? "As you wish, Mr. Walker." The next morning, Vernon rode into town to register for the cattle drive, leaving Sophia and Daniel to their usual routine. The boy was helping her shell peas on the porch when another wagon approached Victor's again, to her surprise. "Mr. Whitman," she called as he pulled up. "Vernon's gone to town." "I know," Victor replied, jumping down. "I saw him there. That's partly why I came by." Daniel abandoned the peas to run to Victor's wagon. "Did you bring candy, Mr. Vic?" Victor laughed. "Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Why don't you check that sack in the back?" While Daniel eagerly searched the wagon, Victor approached Sophia. "Vernon mentioned he's joining the cattle drive." "Yes, he asked me to manage things here while he's gone." Victor nodded, his expression unreadable. 2 weeks is a long time to run a ranch alone, especially if you're not familiar with all the workings." "I'll manage," Sophia said with more confidence than she felt. "I've no doubt," Victor replied, "but I thought you might appreciate these." He pulled a small package from his coat pocket. "Seeds for a kitchen garden. Best to get them in the ground before the first frost." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. "Thank you, that's very kind. And this," he added, producing a book. "For Daniel, and you if you like. It's about the Arizona Territory." "Thought you might want to learn about your new home." Sophia took the book, her fingers brushing his. "You didn't need to do this." "Wanted to," he said simply. His blue eyes held hers for a moment. "Vernon also mentioned he's reconsidering your arrangement." Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You seem remarkably well informed about my personal affairs, Mr. Whitman." A smile played at his lips. "Small town, and Vernon's never been one to keep his thoughts to himself." Daniel returned with a small paper bag, grinning triumphantly. "Found the candy." "Just one piece now," Sophia instructed. "The rest after dinner." Victor watched their interaction with approval. "You're good with him." "He's a good boy," Sophia replied, "bright and curious." "He needs a mother," Victor said quietly. "Vernon knows that. It's why he advertised for a bride in the first place." "A whole mother," Sophia couldn't help adding. "Not one with a defect." Victor's expression darkened. "Is that what he called it?" "Not in so many words," Sophia admitted, but the meaning was clear. "Vernon's a decent man in most ways," Victor said slowly, "but he's got fixed ideas about things, and he cares too much what others think." He nodded toward her leg. "That doesn't make you any less whole, Miss Sanders, not to my mind." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, and she found herself unable to respond. "I should be going," Victor said, seeming to sense her discomfort. "My ranch won't run itself, but I'm just over the North Ridge if you need anything at all." As he prepared to leave, he added, "I'll check in on you and Daniel while Vernon's away, if that's all right." "That would be reassuring," Sophia admitted. "Thank you." With a tip of his hat, Victor was gone, leaving Sophia to contemplate the complexities of her situation and the unexpected warmth that Victor Whitman's kindness stirred within her. The days passed quickly as Vernon prepared for the cattle drive. He spent most daylight hours working with the cattle and making arrangements, while Sophia managed the household and cared for Daniel. Vernon gave her a brief tour of the ranch essentials: where to find chicken feed, how to operate the pump, which outbuildings housed what tools, but his instructions were cursory at best. "You'll figure it out," he said when she asked about caring for the vegetable patch. Nothing growing much this time of year anyway. The evening before his departure, Vernon sat with Sophia at the kitchen table after Daniel was asleep, going through final instructions. "Miller at the general store will extend credit if you need supplies," he explained. "And Doc Peterson knows to come if there's sickness or injury." Sophia nodded, memorizing the details. "And Whitman said he'd look in on you," Vernon added, a hint of something concern, in his voice. "That's very neighborly of him," Sophia replied carefully. Vernon studied her face. "Whitman's a good man," he said grudgingly. "Never married. Had a sweetheart back east who died of smallpox before she could join him. He's been alone ever since." Sophia absorbed this information, understanding it as both warning and permission. "I'll take good care of your home and son, Mr. Walker," she assured him, steering the conversation back to safer ground. Vernon nodded, seemingly relieved. "I know you will," he hesitated. "And when I return, we'll talk about our future." It wasn't much of a promise, but Sophia accepted it with a gracious nod. Whatever happened, she would need Vernon's goodwill at least until she could find another situation. Vernon left before dawn the next morning with the other ranchers participating in the drive. Daniel watched his father go with stoic resignation, having been through this separation before. "Pa always brings me back something from Tucson," he told Sophia as they returned to the house. "Last time it was a wooden horse." "That was very thoughtful of him," Sophia replied. "Now, shall we make breakfast and then see to the chickens?" She was determined to establish a routine that would keep them both occupied and the ranch running smoothly. The first few days went well enough. She managed the basic chores, and Daniel was a surprisingly helpful companion. They fell into a comfortable rhythm of work and play, with time set aside for reading and other quiet activities. On the fourth day, however, dark clouds began to gather on the horizon. By afternoon, a steady rain was falling, and by evening it had turned into a downpour. Sophia checked the roof for leaks and was relieved to find only a small drip in the far corner of the main room, easily contained with a bucket. As they prepared for bed, a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows. "Are you scared?" Daniel asked, his small face serious in the lamplight. "Not at all," Sophia assured him. "We're safe and dry inside. The storm will pass." But as the night wore on, the storm intensified. Sophia lay awake, listening to the howling wind and the increasingly alarming creaks from the barn. Around midnight, a tremendous crash from outside sent her scrambling from bed. She limped to the window, peering out into the darkness. Lightning illuminated the yard in brief, stark flashes, and in one of these, she saw that part of the barn roof had collapsed. "Miss Sophia." Daniel stood in the doorway, clutching his blanket. "Everything's fine," she said automatically. "Just a little trouble with the barn. Go back to bed." But as another flash revealed the horses moving anxiously in the damaged structure, Sophia knew she couldn't wait until morning. The animals could be injured or escape into the storm. "Daniel, I need to check on the horses," she said, reaching for her shawl. "You stay here where it's safe." "Pa wouldn't want you to go out in the storm," the boy protested. "He'd say to wait." "Sometimes we can't wait," Sophia replied, pulling on her boots. "I won't be long. Bar the door behind me and don't open it for anyone but me." Venturing into the storm was terrifying. The rain lashed at her face and the wind threatened to knock her off her feet. Her bad leg protested with every step as she made her slow way across the muddy yard to the barn. Inside, the situation was worse than she'd feared. A large section of the roof had indeed collapsed, allowing rain to pour in. The two horses were still in their stalls but clearly agitated, stomping and whinnying in distress. Thankfully, neither appeared injured, but a beam had fallen dangerously close to Blaze, Vernon's prized gelding. Sophia approached the horse cautiously, speaking in soothing tones. "Easy, boy. Easy now." She managed to secure both horses and lead them to the undamaged side of the barn. The physical effort was immense, and by the time she had them safely tied, her leg was screaming in pain and her dress was soaked through. As she worked to create a temporary barrier against the rain using a tarpaulin, she heard a voice calling her name. For a wild moment, she thought Vernon had somehow returned, but then Victor Whitman appeared in the barn doorway, rain dripping from his hat and coat. "Miss Sanders," he exclaimed. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" "The roof," she gasped, gesturing toward the collapsed section. The horses Victor took in the situation at a glance. "You've done well," he said, moving to help her with the tarpaulin, "but you shouldn't be out in this. Where's Daniel?" "In the house, safe." Sophia's teeth were chattering now, the adrenaline wearing off and the cold setting in. Victor secured the last corner of the tarpaulin, then turned to her. "You're soaked through and freezing. We need to get you inside." The journey back to the house seemed twice as long and 3 times as difficult. Sophia's leg had stiffened painfully, and each step was agony. Victor noticed her increasing struggle and, without asking permission, swept her into his arms. "This is faster," he said simply. Too exhausted to protest, Sophia allowed herself to be carried. Victor's strength was reassuring, his broad chest warm despite his damp coat. She found herself relaxing against him, trusting him in a way that surprised her. Daniel opened the door at their knock, his eyes wide with fear and relief. "Mr. Vic, the roof fell in." "I know, partner," Victor replied, carrying Sophia inside, "but everything's under control now. Your Miss Sophia saved the horses." He set her gently in a chair by the fire, which Daniel had kept burning. "You need dry clothes," he said, "and something warm to drink." While Sophia changed in her room, Victor boiled water for tea and explained to Daniel how brave she had been. When she emerged in a dry dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, Victor had a steaming cup waiting for her. "You shouldn't have gone out alone," he said, but there was admiration rather than censure in his voice. "The horses would have been injured," Sophia replied, "or worse." Victor nodded. "Vernon's lucky to have you looking after his place." He glanced toward the window where the storm continued to rage. "I'll stay until morning, make proper repairs to the barn. Can't leave you with half a roof in this weather." "You don't have to, I know," he interrupted. "I want to." Daniel, reassured that the emergency was over, was nodding off on the rug. Victor scooped him up and carried him to his bed while Sophia sipped her tea, grateful for the warmth returning to her limbs. When Victor returned, he settled in the chair opposite her. "I was worried," he admitted. "When the storm hit, that's why I rode over." "In the middle of the night?" Sophia asked, surprised. "Vernon's place is more exposed than mine," Victor explained. "And I knew you were alone with Daniel." He paused. "I didn't expect to find you in the barn, though." "Most women would have waited till morning." "Most women don't have to prove their usefulness," Sophia said before she could stop herself. Victor studied her for a long moment. "Is that what you think you need to do? Prove yourself worthy of being Vernon's wife?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. I need to show I can manage a ranch despite my limitation." "And if you do," Victor said carefully, "will you marry Vernon?" Sophia stared into her tea. "It would be a sensible arrangement, for Daniel's sake if nothing else." "Sensible," Victor repeated, echoing their earlier conversation about Vernon's civility. "But is that enough?" For a marriage, the question hung between them, laden with unspoken implications. Sophia found herself unable to meet Victor's intense gaze. "I should check on Daniel," she said, rising abruptly. Her leg buckled slightly from the exertion of the evening, and Victor was immediately at her side, steadying her. "You've done enough for one night," he said gently. "Rest, I'll keep watch." Too exhausted to argue, Sophia allowed him to help her to her room. At the doorway, she paused. "Thank you, Mr. Whitman," she said softly, "for coming when you did." His blue eyes held hers. "Victor," he corrected. "After tonight, I think we can dispense with formalities, don't you?" A small smile curved her lips. "Thank you, Victor." As promised, Victor stayed through the night and spent the next day repairing the barn roof. The storm had passed, leaving behind puddles and debris but no further damage to the ranch. Sophia insisted on helping as much as she could, and Daniel eagerly fetched tools and held boards. By late afternoon, the roof was secure once more. Victor accepted Sophia's invitation to stay for dinner, and the 3 of them shared a surprisingly comfortable meal. Daniel, clearly taken with Victor, dominated the conversation with questions about his ranch and horses. "Do you have any cows at your place, Mr. Vic?" "About 50 head, Victor replied. "Not as many as your pa, but enough to keep me busy." "And do you have a dog?" "Pa says we can't have one 'cause they chase the chickens," Victor laughed. I do have a dog, a good cattle dog named Rusty. Could I see him sometime? Daniel asked eagerly. I don't see why not, Victor glanced at Sophia, if Miss Sanders approves. Perhaps Mr. Whitman could bring Rusty over one day next week, Sophia suggested, earning a whoop of excitement from Daniel. After the boy was tucked in bed, Sophia and Victor sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the clearing sky. You're good with him, Victor observed. Daniel, I mean, he's taken to you. He's a sweet child, Sophia replied, easy to love. And his father, the question caught her by surprise. Mr. Walker has been fair, she said carefully. Victor turned to face her directly. That's not what I asked. Sophia sighed. I barely know Vernon. Our correspondence was brief, and since my arrival, she trailed off. He's kept his distance, Victor finished for her. It's understandable, Sophia said, feeling compelled to defend the absent rancher. He expected someone different. Someone who didn't limp, Victor stated bluntly. Sophia flinched slightly but nodded. Yes. And you think that's reasonable? It doesn't matter what I think, Sophia replied. It's how the world is. Victor was silent for a long moment. When I first came to Arizona 15 years ago, he finally said, I had nothing but $20 and a broken heart. The woman I loved had died, and I'd fled east to escape the memories. He gazed out at the darkened landscape. This country taught me something important. Out here, what matters isn't what you can't do, but what you can. Every man and woman has limitations, some visible, some not. He turned to her again. What I see when I look at you, Sophia, isn't a woman with a limp. I see someone brave enough to travel across the country alone, someone who runs into a storm to save animals that aren't even hers, someone who reads to a lonely boy and makes him laugh. The use of her first name, the earnestness in his voice both caught her off guard. Victor, I've said too much, he interrupted, standing abruptly. It's not my place. You came here to marry Vernon and I'm interfering. No, you're being kind, Sophia said, kinder than anyone has been to me in a very long time. Their eyes met in the dim light from the house windows, and something unspoken passed between them. Victor took a step closer, then seemed to think better of it. I should go, he said. My ranch needs attention too. Sophia nodded, unable to ask him to stay though part of her wished to. Thank you again, for everything. As he mounted his horse, Victor looked down at her. I meant what I said before, Sophia. You walk perfectly to me. With those words hanging in the night air, he rode away, leaving Sophia to wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake in coming to Arizona, or if perhaps, against all odds, she'd found exactly where she was meant to be. The days following the storm settled into a quieter routine. Sophia managed the ranch tasks with growing confidence, finding ways to accommodate her physical limitations. She discovered that if she paced herself and planned carefully, she could accomplish nearly everything required, though some chores took her longer than they might someone else. Daniel proved to be an eager assistant, proud to show her the routines he'd learned from his father. Together they fed the animals, gathered eggs, and tended the small vegetable garden that Sophia had begun with Victor's seeds. True to his word, Victor visited several times during Vernon's absence, bringing his dog Rusty to Daniel's delight and checking on repairs to ensure the barn roof would hold. Each visit seemed to last a little longer than the previous one, and Sophia found herself looking forward to his arrival with an anticipation that both troubled and exhilarated her. You've done wonders with that garden, Victor observed on his third visit, crouching to examine the neat rows of seedlings Sophia had planted. Most newcomers give up after their first attempt. I had a small garden in Philadelphia, Sophia explained. Nothing grand, just herbs and a few vegetables. My mother taught me. She taught you well. Victor straightened, brushing dirt from his hands. The soil here is different, more stubborn, but you've got the right touch. It was a small compliment, but Sophia treasured it. Victor had a way of noticing her efforts, acknowledging the work she put into making Vernon's house a home. On his fourth visit, Victor brought news from town. Telegram came for Vernon, he said as they sat on the porch watching Daniel play with Rusty. The cattle drive is going well. They should be back in about a week. Sophia nodded, surprised by her mixed feelings at this news. Part of her was relieved maintaining the ranch alone was exhausting, and Vernon's return would settle her uncertain status. But another part dreaded facing the decision that loomed, whether to accept Vernon's lukewarm proposal or seek another path. "Penny for your thoughts," Victor said, studying her face. "Just wondering what happens next," Sophia admitted. When Vernon returns, Victor was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to happen?" It was the question Sophia had been avoiding. "I want security," she said finally, "somewhere to belong, with Vernon." The question was gentle but direct. Sophia sighed. "I don't know him well enough to say. But he's offered me a place here, and that's more than I had in Philadelphia." She hesitated. "And Daniel needs a mother." "You deserve more than just security, Sophia," Victor said softly. "You deserve someone who sees you, truly sees you." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. Before Sophia could respond, Daniel came running up, breathless with excitement. "Miss Sophia, Rusty found a rabbit hole. Can we see if there are babies?" The moment broken, Sophia smiled at the boy. "We can look, but we mustn't disturb them if we find any." As she rose to follow Daniel, her legs stiff from sitting, Victor offered his arm without comment or fuss, a simple courtesy extended without pity. Sophia accepted it gratefully, her hand resting lightly on his forearm as they walked together across the yard. It was in these small moments, these gestures of respect and understanding, that Sophia found herself drawn to Victor in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. He treated her not as damaged goods, but as a whole woman, capable and worthy of consideration. The week passed quickly, and soon it was the day before Vernon's expected return. Victor arrived in the late afternoon with a small deer he'd shot, offering to share the meat with Sophia and Daniel. "No sense letting it go to waste," he said, already beginning to dress the animal efficiently. "And I thought you might appreciate a special meal for Vernon's return." Sophia recognized the gesture for what it was, a final kindness before Vernon reclaimed his place. "That's very thoughtful," she said. "Daniel and I will prepare vegetables to go with it." They worked companionably, Victor butchering the deer while Sophia and Daniel gathered potatoes and carrots from the garden. As the sun began to set, they moved indoors to prepare the meal together. Daniel, excited by the prospect of his father's return, chattered happily as he helped set the table. "Pa's gonna be so surprised by the garden, and wait till he sees how I can feed the chickens all by myself now." "He'll be very proud of you," Sophia assured him, exchanging a smile with Victor over the boy's head. After dinner, Daniel fell asleep quickly, worn out by excitement. Sophia and Victor found themselves alone on the porch once more, watching the stars appear in the clear autumn sky. "I want to thank you," Sophia said after a comfortable silence, "for everything you've done these past 2 weeks. I don't know how I would have managed without your help." "You'd have managed fine," Victor replied. "You're stronger than you realize, Sophia." She smiled at his faith in her. "Perhaps, but your friendship has meant a great deal to me." "Friendship," Victor repeated softly, a question in his voice. Sophia looked away, her heart suddenly racing. "Victor, I know," he interrupted. "You came here to marry Vernon. You made a commitment." "Yes." Victor turned to face her fully. "But I need to ask you something before he returns, something I have no right to ask but will regret forever if I don't." Sophia met his gaze, knowing what was coming and both dreading and longing for it. "Are you in love with him?" Victor asked simply. The directness of the question took her breath away. I barely know him," she stammered. "That's not an answer." Sophia swallowed hard. "No," she admitted. "I'm not in love with Vernon." Victor nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "And if another man were to offer you a different choice, a life based on something more than mere security, would you consider it?" "Are you that man, Victor?" Sophia asked, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. Instead of answering, Victor closed the distance between them. His hand gently cupped her cheek, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. When they separated, Sophia was trembling not from fear but from the force of emotions she'd kept carefully contained for so long. "I've thought of nothing but you since the day you arrived," Victor confessed. "Your courage, your kindness, your gentle way with Daniel. The way you refused to be defined by your limp. He took her hands in his. I know it's sudden. I know you came here with other expectations, but I'm asking you to consider me, Sophia. Consider a life with someone who sees you walk perfectly because you do. Sophia's mind raced. The proper thing would be to wait for Vernon to honor her commitment, but the thought of a life with Victor, a man who had shown her nothing but respect and genuine affection, was overwhelmingly tempting. I need time, she said finally. Vernon returns tomorrow. I owe him an honest conversation at least. Victor nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course, I wouldn't ask you to do otherwise. He kissed her hands before releasing them. Whatever you decide, know that you have options, Sophia, you're not trapped. As she watched him ride away, his silhouette disappearing into the darkness, Sophia felt both terrified and exhilarated. For the first time since her accident, someone had offered her not pity, not mere tolerance, but genuine love. The realization was as frightening as it was liberating. Vernon and the other ranchers returned the following afternoon, tired but satisfied with the success of the cattle drive. Daniel ran to greet his father with excited stories of the storm, the barn repairs, and the garden Sophia had planted. Vernon listened with patient amusement, ruffling his son's hair. Sounds like you two managed just fine without me, he observed, his gaze taking in the well-maintained yard and the flourishing garden. Miss Sophia saved the horses in the storm, Daniel exclaimed. And then Mr. Vic fixed the roof and brought his dog to visit. Vernon's expression tightened slightly at the mention of Victor. Did he now? Sophia stepped forward. Mr. Whitman was very helpful during the storm, she said evenly. The barn roof partially collapsed and he assisted with repairs. Vernon studied her face, then nodded. I appreciate his help, he said, though his tone suggested mixed feelings. And yours, Miss Sanders, the place looks good. It was a grudging compliment, but Sophia accepted it with grace. I've prepared a special dinner to welcome you home, she said. Venison stew. Sounds fine, Vernon replied, his manner warming slightly. Let me get cleaned up. Dinner was a pleasant enough affair, with Vernon sharing stories from the cattle drive and Daniel eagerly recounting their adventures at the ranch. Sophia remained mostly quiet, observing the interaction between father and son with a clarity she hadn't possessed before. When Daniel was finally in bed, Vernon joined Sophia by the fire, nursing a cup of coffee laced with whiskey. You really did manage well, he said after a long silence. Better than I expected, if I'm being honest. Thank you, Sophia replied. I enjoyed caring for your home and Daniel. Vernon nodded, studying the flames. And Whitman, he visited often. He checked on us several times, Sophia acknowledged. Especially after the storm, he was concerned. I'm sure he was, Vernon murmured. He took a long sip of his drink. Miss Sanders, Sophia, before I left, we discussed revisiting the matter of marriage when I returned. Sophia's heart began to race. Yes, we did. Well, I've been thinking, Vernon continued, seeing how you managed here, how Daniel has taken to you. Perhaps we should proceed as originally planned. He looked up at her, his expression a mixture of resolution and resignation. If you're still willing. It was the offer she'd come 3,000 miles to accept security, a home, a family of sorts. Yet now, with Vernon sitting across from her making what amounted to a business proposition, Sophia found herself unable to feel the gratitude she'd expected. Mr. Walker, she began carefully. I appreciate your offer and I've grown very fond of Daniel. Vernon nodded, seeming relieved. Good, then it's settled, but, Sophia interrupted gently, I need to be honest with you. I don't think I'm the wife you truly want. Vernon's brow furrowed. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't want to marry you. You want a mother for Daniel, Sophia corrected. And someone to manage your household. Both worthy desires, but a marriage should be built on more, don't you think? Vernon shifted uncomfortably. In time, those feelings often develop. Perhaps, Sophia agreed, but I believe we both deserve a chance at something more than mere convenience. She took a deep breath. And I believe you're still uncomfortable with my condition. Vernon had the grace to look ashamed. I've been unfair, he admitted. You've proven yourself more than capable. It's not about proving myself capable, Sophia said gently. It's about finding someone who never needed that proof in the first place, someone who sees me as whole, just as I am. Understanding dawned in Vernon's eyes. Whitman, he said flatly. Sophia didn't deny it. He's shown me kindness without condition. Vernon was quiet for a long moment. I've known Victor Whitman for 10 years, he finally said. He's a good man, better than most if I'm being honest, he sighed heavily. Better than me in some ways. You're a good man too, Vernon, Sophia said sincerely, and a good father. Daniel adores you. Vernon nodded, accepting the truth of this. Does Whitman know how you feel? We've spoken, Sophia admitted. But I told him I needed to talk with you first. I owe you that respect. Vernon studied her face. You care for him. It wasn't a question, but Sophia answered anyway. Yes. Another long silence fell between them. Finally, Vernon drained his cup and set it aside. Well, he said with forced lightness, I suppose this means I'll need to place another advertisement. The attempt at humor, clumsy as it was, revealed a decency in Vernon that Sophia had glimpsed but never fully experienced. I'm sorry, she said. I never meant to complicate your life. Life's always complicated, Vernon replied with a shrug. At least Daniel got some good stories out of it. He rose from his chair. You're welcome to stay until you sort out your arrangements. Sophia recognized the generosity in this offer. Thank you, I won't impose for long. As Vernon headed to his bedroom, he paused. For what it's worth, Miss Sanders, I think Victor Whitman's a lucky man. And not just because he's getting a fine cook and housekeeper. It was the closest thing to a genuine compliment Vernon had ever given her, and Sophia treasured it for the hard-won acknowledgement it represented. The next morning, Sophia explained to Daniel that she would be leaving soon. The boy's face fell but brightened somewhat when she promised to visit often. Will you still read to me sometimes? He asked anxiously. Of course, Sophia assured him, and perhaps you can visit me too if your father allows it. Vernon, overhearing this exchange, gave a gruff nod. We'll see. After breakfast, Sophia wrote a brief note to Victor, asking him to call at the Walker Ranch when convenient. She gave it to Vernon, who promised to have it delivered by one of the ranch hands heading to town. Victor arrived the following afternoon, clearly uncertain of his reception. Vernon met him in the yard, and Sophia watched anxiously from the window as the two men spoke. Though she couldn't hear their conversation, their body language suggested neither hostility nor warmth, just the cautious respect of men who understood an unspoken code. When Victor approached the house, his expression was guarded but hopeful. Sophia, he greeted her, Vernon said you wanted to see me. Yes, she replied, suddenly nervous. I wanted to tell you that I've spoken with Vernon about our situation. Victor's eyes searched her face. And I've declined his proposal, she said simply. A slow smile spread across Victor's face, transforming his rugged features. Have you now? I have, Sophia confirmed. It seems I've developed feelings for someone else, someone who sees me as I am. Victor stepped closer. Is that right? It is. Sophia found herself smiling too, the tension of the past weeks finally lifting. Though I should warn you, this someone has only known me a short time. He might discover I'm more stubborn than he realized. Victor laughed, a deep, joyful sound that seemed to fill the small porch. I'm counting on it, he said, taking her hands in his. Stubborn women make the best ranchers' wives. Is that a proposal, Mr. Whitman? Sophia teased, though her heart was pounding. It is, Victor replied, suddenly serious. I love you, Sophia Sanders. Your courage, your kindness, your gentle strength. I love the way you face each day without complaint or self-pity. I love how you read to Daniel and plant gardens in stubborn soil. He squeezed her hands. And I love the way you walk perfectly, beautifully you. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. I love you too, she whispered, for seeing me when others looked away. Their kiss was witnessed by Daniel, who giggled from the doorway, and by Vernon, who watched from the corral with a complicated expression that eventually settled into something like acceptance. Sophia and Victor were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Gila City. The same women who had mocked Sophia's arrival now offered stiff congratulations, their curiosity about this unexpected match barely concealed beneath their pleasantries. Never thought Victor Whitman would marry, Mrs. Prescott remarked to her companion. Especially not someone with such an obvious difficulty. The comment reached Sophia's ears as she greeted guests at the small reception. Before she could respond, Victor's arm slipped around her waist. My wife has no difficulties that I can see, Mrs. Prescott, he said pleasantly but firmly. Only remarkable strengths. The women retreated, properly chastised, and Sophia looked up at her new husband with undisguised adoration. My hero, she teased. Just stating facts, Victor replied, kissing her forehead. Now, Mrs. Whitman, shall we go home? Home. The word had never sounded sweeter to Sophia's ears. The Whitman ranch was larger than Vernon's, with a sprawling single-story house built of solid timber and local stone. Victor had spent the 2 weeks before their wedding making accommodations for Sophia's comfort-widening doorways, adding railings where needed, rearranging furniture to create clear pathways. You didn't need to change your home for me, Sophia protested when he showed her these modifications. I wanted to, Victor replied simply. Not because you couldn't manage otherwise, but because I want you to be comfortable here. He squeezed her hand. This is your home now too, Sophia. I want it to feel that way, and it did. Within weeks, Sophia had transformed the bachelor's quarters into a true home, adding feminine touches that Victor appreciated rather than merely tolerated. She planted an expansive garden, began raising chickens, and set up a small dairy operation that soon produced enough butter and cheese to sell in town. Victor watched her flourish with pride and occasional amazement. You're a force of nature, he told her one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. Half the ranchers' wives in the county are asking their husbands why they can't have fresh butter and preserves like the Whitmans, Sophia laughed. Just making myself useful. You're far more than useful, Victor said, taking her hand. You're essential. Their happiness was complete the following spring when Sophia discovered she was expecting a child. The pregnancy was difficult with her condition, but Dr. Peterson provided attentive care, and Victor was an unwavering source of support. You're sure it's safe? Victor asked the doctor anxiously during one visit. With her leg, women have been having babies under all sorts of conditions since the beginning of time, Doctor. Peterson replied matter-of-factly. Miss Sophia's hip and leg will make things a bit more challenging, but nothing we can't manage, and manage they did. On a warm September evening in 1877, after a long and arduous labor, Sophia gave birth to a healthy baby boy whom they named James after her father. He's perfect, Victor whispered, cradling his son with tears in his eyes. Just like his mother. As James grew, he was joined by two sisters, Elizabeth in 1879 and Margaret in 1882. The Whitman Ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Victor's innovative breeding techniques and Sophia's thriving side businesses contributed to their growing reputation as a formidable partnership. Vernon Walker remained a neighbor and, eventually, a friend. Daniel became a frequent visitor to the Whitman home, forming a close bond with James despite their age difference. As the years passed, the initial awkwardness faded, replaced by the easy camaraderie of frontier families who understood the value of good neighbors. In 1885, when Gila City established its first proper school, Sophia was asked to teach, her education and gentle manner making her an ideal candidate despite, or perhaps because of her physical difference. The children of Gila City learned early that limitations existed only in the mind, a lesson their teacher embodied daily. The whispers and stares that had greeted Sophia's arrival a decade earlier gradually transformed into respect and even admiration. The mail-order bride with the pronounced limp became Mrs. Whitman, the schoolteacher, the successful rancher's wife, the mother of 3 bright children. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Victor surprised Sophia with a special gift, a beautiful walking stick carved from mesquite wood, topped with a silver handle engraved with their initials. Not because you need it, he explained as she admired the craftsmanship. But because even the strongest among us deserve support sometimes. Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she accepted the gift. I've never hidden from my condition, she said softly, but you're the first person who made me feel it wasn't something to overcome, just a part of who I am. Victor took her face in his hands. Do you know what I see when I look at you, even after all these years? He asked. I see the woman who limped off that train and straight into my heart, the woman who braved a storm to save someone else's horses. the woman who teaches our children and a dozen others that courage isn't about physical perfection, but about facing each day with grace. I see a woman who walks perfectly, he continued, echoing the words that had changed her life a decade earlier. Perfectly you, perfectly mine. As the Arizona sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Sophia leaned into her husband's embrace, profoundly grateful for the journey that had brought her to this place, this man, this life. The road had been long and often difficult, but every uneven step had led her home.